Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chicago Justice Show. I am your host, Tracy Siska. I'm also the executive director of the Chicago Justice Project. You can find out more about what we do at chicagojustice.org, our transparency work, our accountability work. Also posted to the site regularly now are our ongoing series around media coverage of gun violence in Chicago every weekend. And then also just posted over this weekend our first of a kind of watching what I call kind of like political operations disguising themselves as media outlets: CWB Chicago, Chicago City Wire, and now Chicago Contrarian, which that one is way out there. And the Chicago Contrarian this last week just announced that people who posted at Second City Cop Blog, who recently took down their blog kind of at the weird time. Don't understand why that blog was shut down, but now they're moving their content over to Chicago Contrarian. And if they're moving their commenters, it should be interesting. Their comments were definitely many of which were really, really disgusting. Anyways, what is on our show today? We're going to start out. A featured segment is on FOP Watch, which is when we look at what's going on communications-wise out of the Fraternal Order of Police in Chicago, the largest police union in Chicago. The president, John Catanzara, who was spoken about many times on this program, he does a regular Friday video called Friday Update on YouTube. And we critique that, take it apart. We're going to play you some clips this week, so that's our featured item. Then we're going to talk about a number of things. Police Academy training, how body cameras fail. Our recurring segment now, Social Media Fails, is going to have 2 regulars in there because, God, every week I probably could post 20 of their posts every week. Then we're going to have a break, and after the break, we talk about the Friday dump of a new search warrant policy. I bet you didn't hear that because for some reason CPD and Mayor Lightfoot, announced their new search warrant policy was created and implemented, and it's on a Friday. They must really feel confident about it. Then we talk about Lightfoot and her need for transparency, not from her, but from the media telling she needs to be transparent. We talk about a possible replacement for COPA. The head of COPA, Sydney Roberts, resigned or is in the process of resigning. I think she leaves this week, at the end of this week, if I'm not mistaken. There was some news possible that there's a replacement, although no other outlet picked it up. So I'm kind of curious about whether it has any truth to it. And then we end with a revelation in the email dump. We've talked about this a number of occasions coming from the mayors and the police department, and has a study being done for the mayor that shows that 66% of the car accidents that the CPD were involved, 66% of the chases the CPD were in, car chases, in 2019, 2/3 of them ended in accidents and 8 of them ended in fatalities. This is why people are calling for reforms of those things. Okay, but first, if you want to sponsor this show, which we go Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5:30 Central every week, you can do so at this on our website. Go to chicagojustice.org and you will find a donate button. You can sponsor our show. We'd really appreciate it. We'd love to expand the streaming regularly to the police board and the city council. And there's the link in the chat. We'd also like to do the Cook County Board and the General Assembly when they cover crime and justice issues. So please follow that link and help sponsor this show. And we also do corporate sponsorships, and we can custom make one to whatever your organization or company needs. So, all right. First segment, FOP Watch, the Fraternal Order of Police. I start out saying this every time. The head of the union, John Catanzara, he's been in office like a year and a half, maybe 2 years. Maybe a little longer now. He's got a track record. 50 complaints, mostly from 50 complaints against him, almost all from other officers and supervisors. Yep, almost very few citizen complaints in comparison to the massive amounts of complaints he has from internal sources. So he claims that is just because of bosses don't like him, but he doesn't like authority, but it's funny, he is authority, and when people question him or the police, he hates it, but when he questions authority, perfectly legitimate. So anyways, let's get to our first clip of that.
Detectives, RBT specifically. I know you're getting stuck out on the corners again this weekend. There isn't much we can do with that. That's just a sad reality. If the department is willing to let cases sit and go cold without detectives investigating them because they're not a violent crime, well, then that's an answer that they can give the citizens who have these case reports waiting for an answer. It's not going to change anytime soon, I'm told. They seem to think that scarecrow policing is the way to go, and just mere presence on street corners is going to make a difference. It's been proven that it doesn't. We've all known shootings that happened even in the old VRI boxes, literally at the other end of a block where a squad car was at. These criminals are not going to stop unless they're kept in jail or sent to prison for long terms. That is the only solution to the crime problem in this city, is getting criminals off the street for extended periods of time. Until the superintendent and the mayor want to start calling out the state's attorney and the judges, the chief judge and everybody else in the criminal courts who keep letting these offenders out with almost no consequences whatsoever or no bail whatsoever, this isn't going to change no matter how many policemen you put on a street corner.
All right, so a lot to take in. There's all kinds of assumptions packaged up there. And trust me, he has no evidence to support. First of all, does solving minor crimes result in less crime and violence down the road? It does if you think deterrence works. It's pretty much proven, though, deterrence for the most part doesn't work. That's why people are seeking reform. It doesn't work. He doesn't have any evidence of that. He knows it because he just knows it. It's a God-given ability once you're a police officer to know everything about policing. He does not. It has been proven, he says, that police presence does not deter crime. We know when we've been out on the street and someone's been on the corner and there's been a shooting a block away or at the end of the block, oh my God. It's been proven that police presence doesn't deter crime. He seems pretty sure about that. That, of course, to some degree is wrong. It doesn't prevent all crime from ever happening. But just because you were out on the street sitting on a corner and a shooting happened a block away doesn't mean for all things, all times, it doesn't prevent crime, police presence. I would argue, I'm kind of questioning, at least from him, why we need so many police. All right, we'll get to that. The only solution is long-term prison sentences. Really? Well, then the number of police we have doesn't matter. Okay? Now, should we increase sentences? If we increase sentences, can we reduce cops? Because if it's all sentencing, then we don't need as many cops. Just put everyone in jail for longer sentences and greatly reduce the number of cops. Is he really saying that? Well, let's get on to clip 2 and see if he contradicts himself at all.
With that being said, have a safe weekend. Know that we're going to keep fighting the fight. We need cooperation. If any officer has an issue, please call the lodge, whether it's performance management implications or threats from sergeants for lack of activity. If you have sheets that you can produce to the lodge as far as beat coverage and rapid cars, please send them to us too, because we're looking at a lawsuit for manpower shortages across this city. I'll just give you one of the really egregious issues is the 6th district. And the fact that that's their span and control according to the consent decree, and they can't even staff that district properly. The mismanagement within this department is ridiculous. I don't even know where the blame actually falls, or who's running the department at this point. It seems like it's by committee, and nobody's taking the lead. That's just a sad reality.
Okay. So now, let's watch him or listen to him flip the script here, ladies and gentlemen. The department is understaffed and undermanned. Wait a minute, my friend. You said police presence doesn't stop crime, and what we need is longer sentences. So then why does the number of cops matter? If it's all about sentencing, then the number of cops doesn't matter. But now here he's saying we're massively understaffed, and it's all about policing and staffing. What a hypocrite. Which one is it, President Catanzara? Take your pick. It can't both be sentencing and staffing. You said in the clip before it's all about sentencing. Now all of a sudden it's all about police. Take your pick, my friend. You can't have it both ways. But when you're pulling stuff for thin air out of or some orifice, you can have it both ways. Right? How very Trumpian of him, actually. Now, he talks about talking to the superintendent and the fact that they're 800 under. 800 under what? Well, we're 800 cops under. Under what? What number? Well, I'm going to repeat this, and it's on our blog many, many, many times on CJP's website. That number is BS. It's like 13,750 or 13,700, somewhere in there. Several years ago, I did my best to do research and find out from the Research and Development Division and sources within the department and command level sources, where did this number come from? Where did it come from? As best anyone can tell, that number was negotiated during Phil Klein's time as superintendent, but that number was negotiated between the superintendent of police and aldermen. It's a political number. It's not based off science. It's not based off anything. It's a political number the superintendent sitting on with aldermen negotiated and the Daley administration negotiated. It's not. It's a made up number. It has no bearing in reality whatsoever about how many cops we should have. LA has less crime, less violence, a bigger area to cover, and several thousand less cops, or at least a few thousand less cops. I think the whole department's like 8,000. We're somewhere in the 12,000 range. There's not a one-to-one correlation. There is no set number. It's not determined by science. The number Catanzara and the Superintendent Brown, who's also just taking the reign over of lying and lying and lying from all the past superintendents, it's a made-up number. It's a crapola number that means nothing. And they're just, you're 800, what we're budgeted for 10, 12, 15 years ago. 20 years ago. It's crapola. It's not determined by science. We think it was done in that political process as best we can tell. There's no science behind it. We're going to be fully staffed in a year. Okay, well then, if we give you that number that you think is fully staffed, crime's going to drop, right, President Catanzara? Right? No. It may drop because COVID will be over, but it isn't going to drop from what the police are doing. Or it'll drop very little from what the police are doing. It isn't anti-police to say they have a lot less to do with crime. Crime increases have very little to do many times with what the police are doing. The flip side of that, however, is when crime drops, it also has very little to do with policing or the justice system. But these politicians that are, the superintendents take credit for the drop, so they got to own the raise. But they never own the raise. It's always someone else's fault. The fact that their whole premise is based on BS, that shouldn't deter you. Okay, let's go to the third and final clip of this Friday update.
With that being said, have a safe weekend. Know that we're going to keep fighting the fight. We need cooperation. If any officer has an issue, please call the lodge, whether it's performance management implications or threats from sergeants for lack of activity. If you have sheets that you can produce to the lodge as far as beat coverage and rapid cars, please send them to us too, because we're looking at a lawsuit for manpower shortages across this city. I'll just give you one of the really egregious issues is the 6th District. And the fact that that's their span and control according to the consent decree, and they can't even staff that district properly. The mismanagement within this department is ridiculous. I don't even know where the blame actually falls, or who's running the department at this point. It seems like it's by committee, and nobody's taking the lead. That's just a sad reality.
Oh, sorry, we're having some audio issues there, internet problem. Sorry about that. Um, so this lawsuit's a joke. Don't give it. They have no science to back it up. None. Zero. Zilch. And I'll tell you how much. So, I was on a panel at Loyola Law School several years ago under the Mike Shields administration running the union. Professor Lombardo invited me, kind of set me up. It was myself, the police union, Lombardo, the Chicago Crime Commission. They were determined. I wrote a blog that said Chicago has more cops per capita than any city in the country, which they do, any major city. And it did at the time at least. And that there's no evidence, scientific evidence, that we need more cops, right? LA has a bigger area, I think bigger population and like 8,000 cops. We have somewhere in the 12,000 range. And I didn't know I was have to give a formal presentation. I thought I was just going there to answer questions. I get there, I have to give a formal presentation. And I basically say what I'm going to say to you, and it's an important issue. The reason the FOP, that police union that Catanzaro runs, does not have a analysis that says exactly how many officers Chicago needs using the calls for service, which is one of the things you can use. The second thing you use is you can use crime to some extent, crime incident data. The reason they don't have it, and they've never done it, is, and this is what I said in the speech, is because they're worried it's going to show they need less than than that political number, maybe even less than they had at the time. Okay? Now the union gets up after me and says it's not our responsibility to know how many officers we need. What? What do you mean it's not your responsibility? You're the union representing patrol officers. Shouldn't you want science to determine how many patrol officers you actually need? The answer is no, they just want more. It's always more. So this lawsuit's a joke. They're eventually going to have to court. They're going to have to prove exactly how many they need and why. They have no ability to do that. They have no interest in science. They're not going to court. That's a joke. It's a veiled threat to make the union membership think they're working for them. It's a joke. He's just exploiting them. playing them out to the right. There's no right number. It's very hard to do it. We're trying to do it. We have millions and millions. We have metadata on millions and millions and millions for calls. Metadata on millions and millions of calls for service. We're going to be trying to do that this summer about determining staffing numbers. It is not easy, but let me guarantee you that the FOP has no interest in determining that number. It's just more. That's all they want. Okay. Here's our second clip, and I'll read it. It's an article out of The Conversation, an online news source. Police academies dedicate 3.21% of training hours to ethics or other public service topics, new research shows. It's an interesting article. The link will be in the chat. It's worth a read. The reason I brought it is, the reason I'm talking about it briefly here is that according to this research, the average number of hours that police have to spend in the academy by state is 640 hours. Illinois is 560 hours. So that would be 80 hours less, or maybe 2 weeks less of academy training. I think academy training and education requirements and academy training are way too low. Way too low. They need to be massively beefed up. The interesting thing here in this article, it looks like at like public service and ethics training, and how much of that is made up of each state's mandatory hours. So, according to this, 560 hours by Illinois, 31 of those hours, or just 6%, about, are in ethics and social services. The rest is what you would think: use of force, police writing, report writing, probably some cover up for your partner under all costs, defensive driving skills, things like that. Just 6%. Tell me that over the last several years, if not several decades in Chicago, why there hasn't been a greater push on ethics, morals, values. Right? I mean, come on. 6%? It's atrocious. And not all of that is on ethics. Some of that 6% is actually like social service stuff. I had a source, I still have a source in the department that would say, he would tell his officers, you got to understand, you're on the job now, and we're the social service of first response, not last response. We should be last response, but we're first. And that's a reality. And all the reason more that we need more ethics, more social service training in our police academies, and in policing in general, but in police academies, and a continuing training. Now, it's interesting. I don't exactly remember what the national number was, but sadly, Illinois, you can look on the map that's at that link. Illinois is above the national average for ethics. Below in total hours, but above the national average as far as percentage of total hours that are devoted to ethics and social services, which is less than a week. Less than 4 full days if you're doing it 9 to 5, right? 8 hours a day. Just under it. It's pretty sad, but it shows up on the street, right? When you're training people that are mostly thinking they're going to be warriors, you get warriors on the street, and you don't get people delivering social services who also happen to be trained in use of force. So let's hope they change. I think it's a really interesting article for you to take a look at. We're going to move on to our next segment, which is the USA Today, and it reads, body cams haven't lived up to the promises of exposing police misconduct. One reason: the police decide what to release. Now, this is true, and this is not really in effect in Chicago at this time, for the most part. Don't hear me out, ladies and gentlemen. So under Rahm Emanuel, when the Laquan McDonald video got outed, released through the FOIA lawsuit, and all the fallout, Rahm came up with a video release policy that mandates more or less that all body cam videos of shootings and serious misconduct, if I'm right, have to be released within 60 days. So to some extent, Illinois is ahead of the game on this because we have that policy now. So that's good. We'll get back to that in a minute. Are you shocked by this reality? If you let the police decide nationally, if we're looking at a national issue, that body camera, of course not. This is how it goes. Yes, we'll take that tool on. We just won't release any of the video. Screw you. We don't care what you think. Most of these tools are agreed upon because the police know they can manipulate the system to minimize how people to use them, use those tools to hold them accountable, but also how they can manipulate how the public sees the police. What's the answer? It's the same thing I've been harking since day one of this show. We need legislation. We don't need policies, by the way. We're gonna go back and connect this to the Chicago policy. We don't need a police department policy. Those don't work. We don't need a police accountability system policy. Those don't work. We need legislation. The Illinois General Assembly should make it a felony to withhold this body camera footage beyond 60 days or 30 days, 45 days, whatever that number is. Felony. Mandate must be released. Unless exigent circumstances are in play, and at that point you have to seek publicly, with public documents, you have to seek an exemption to that rule with the Illinois Attorney General's office or something like that. If you leave it up to CPD policy, police policy, the police accountability system policy, they're just not going to answer. It's a joke. What do I mean? Well, if you read, you can go back and watch one of our shows with Deborah Witzberg, the Deputy Public Safety Inspector General for Chicago now. In 2020, she talked about, they did a review and they showed that COPA, the Citizen Office of Police Accountability, the agency that's supposed to release this video, they don't maintain the video. They have to get the police video in cases they get complaints in. They have to get it from the police department. So what the audit that the Deputy Public Safety Inspector General did is researched, well, how often does COPA get it out within 60 days? Oh, they have an issue. Well, why does that issue exist? Ooh, it turns out the police department rarely gets the video from police shootings and other serious misconduct events to COPA within 60 days. So how the hell can COPA do enough of an investigation to release the video if they don't get the video in 60 days? Well, they're not breaking the law, they're breaking policy. Policies that have no ramifications for them. You have to mandate it in law, put a felony on it, hold people accountable. If they're worried about getting criminally charged, guess what? That video is going to be forthcoming. The CPD and the employees who are involved are going to make sure of it because it's going to be their butt in the hot seat worried about going to prison. But that's about getting our legislature. They started to move. Now that we need them to continue to move into the right direction. Okay, I know you're going to be surprised. We're going to do our social media fail section before we take a break. And I know you're going to be surprised by who is featured in this. I literally could do this every other day, or maybe sometimes twice a day. It's really ridiculous. So let's hit up 15th Ward Alderman Raymond Lopez for our first social media fail. It's a USA Today article from us about body cameras, which we just talked about. Right, it's body cameras haven't lived up to the promises of exposing police misconduct. And here's Alderman Lopez responding to that tweet with one of his own. Oh, here's the crazy thought. Misconduct is something every officer does not participate in. A vast majority of police might actually do their job, again, crazy thought, correctly and without incident. Uh-oh, Alderman. Uh-oh. Here's your fundamental misunderstanding, and because you're so far right-wing, and you're all about scoring political points and about emotion, and very much in line with Catanzara and the FOP and the police union, and you're not dealing with reality, here's a problem, which is why your tweet is such a problem. No one's saying all the cops are bad. You're trying to put that in people's mouths. You're trying to do that, sir. That's your manipulation. You're lying. That's not what's going on. The problem, Alderman, is not that every cop's bad. It's that the good cops don't tell on the bad cops. That's the problem. And that's why you need body cameras, my friend. No officer at the Laquan McDonald murder, no officer wrote a report and said, you know what, no one took his gun, no one took his badge and said, hey, he murdered Laquan McDonald. They covered it up. That's what they do. They could all have been stellar, beautiful, amazing officers. When they got on that scene and they saw a murder committed by one of their own, they knew exactly what to do. They covered it up. That's what they do. That's why you need body cameras. And even with body cameras and dash cameras, they still covered it up. They did something to the Burger King video, but they couldn't get rid of the dash cam and the body cam video. I think it was all dash cam in the Laquan McDonald's case. They couldn't get rid of it. Right? None of those officers, there was like 10 officers on the scene, and the supervisors all saw that. None of them arrested him. It was a murder. They watched a murder. It's not about whether it's out of guidelines. It's a murder. Arrest him. That's what you do. Not the blue. We don't arrest the blue. So if you're thinking, oh, body cameras aren't needed because most officers do everything right. They do. A lot of officers do everything right except tell on the bad ones. They won't ever turn one of their guys in. Are you kidding me? This is such crapola. It's unbelievable. But when you're a Trumpist, Cassis, John Cass person, you don't look for facts or logic or anything. You just have an ideology you're going to push no matter what. Damn be facts. No facts penetrate the Lopez. None. Okay. And by the way, here, Laquan McDonald, 0 officers turned him in. How many officers turned in John Burge to the police department when they saw him torturing those people? 0. They should have slapped cuffs on him. Electrocuted guys, suffocated them with typewriter bags, played Russian roulette, fired shotguns into their mouths with no shells in them. Seems like crimes to me. How many turned them in over 20 years? 0. But they're all great cops. No, not all of them are doing what John Burge does, but the ones who knew what John Burge were doing, they didn't say a word, my friend. They didn't say a word. So that's just, you popping ideology down, trying to shove it down people's throats. Here's our second one, because Lopez can never just do one. 3-shot, it's an NBC tweet that he's responding to. 3-shot, 2 in critical condition in shopping district on near North Side police. And then there's a link to the NBC article, NBC Chicago article. Another gangster rap feud shooting, and not a peep from Lightfoot or Brown. Is he paying attention? Is he even here, or is Brown back in Texas again? What is Brown gonna say? Oh no. Shooting bad. What is Lightfoot going to say? What do you want them to say? The reality is there's not much they can say. This is not new to the city. He's trying to make you think, drum it up like it's new. It's not new. It's not new to the city. None of this violence is. It's higher than it's been over the last several years. Of course, we're in a worldwide pandemic. You don't think violence is going to come out of that? You're ignorant as can be. Mind-blowingly dumb, if that's your view. It's mind-blowingly dumb. This is, once again, Lopez exploiting violence for political points. That's all this is. And you talk about the morals and values of someone that will exploit urban violence, city violence, to score points for just political points. No real plan on how to solve things. Sad. Speaking of exploiting things, this guy never lets one get through, and I'm going to give you the context about why he loves one union more than another. Here is former Chicago Public Schools CEO under Richard Daley. Remember those great days of how CPS was just thriving? I don't, but he thinks they were. But here is Mr. Vallis. Remember, he was a mayoral candidate when Lightfoot won in that campaign, I think in 2019. You may not remember him because he took ninth. I mean, he was a couple of notches below Bob Fioretti. I'm not sure if anyone remembers Fioretti ran in that campaign, but he did. Here is the tweet. How much more can CPD officers take? All officers told they're working 12 hours a day with days off canceled May 21st through June 7th. After a year filled with 12-hour days, canceled days off, 40% of cops contracting COVID. Officers are burned down and exhausted. Meanwhile, 4 years and no contract. Rough year for cops, no doubt about it. No doubt. I wish it wasn't. Isn't that the gig? Isn't that the gig, Paul? Didn't they know, like, pandemic hits, crap's going to hit the fan, and we're going to have to work a lot? Like, I don't want there to be protests. I don't want there to be any of it. Right? I don't want there to be any of it. You know? It's police violence and the pandemic that drove those. So, first of all, let's be clear why some of this happened. Pandemic driving a lot of it. Laquan McDonald, John Burge, SOS section going crazy and kidnapping people off the street and beating them and robbing them. Joseph Majanowski, not to mention George Floyd. You can go on and on and on with the victims. So the police need to take some responsibility over this. And like I said, how many of those good cops that you're so cheering for turned in Laquan McDonald? What percentage of them on the street? I mean, turned in George Floyd? Oh, that's right, nothing. That's right, none of them. Sometimes you got to, reap what you sow? Yep. You can't have a blue wall of silence and then expect there not to be ramifications, Paul. But here, I really want to get to this one part of this. His tweet, still have no contract. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. For time immemorial in Chicago, when the police union signs a contract that's always a year or 2 or 3 or 4, overdue. The past contract is still fully in force. So they're working under a contract. The new one is usually a negotiation around accountability issues and payroll issues. You look at John Catanzara and 50 complaints. They elected that guy. There is no way he's going to do anything more with accountability, even no matter what happened with Floyd and all the protests and the unrest. They're not going to make any moves. So the contracts are going to stay forever and a day out. They're not. It's going to be forever before it gets put in. The FOP could come to the table. Honestly, they never have and they never will. It's not what they do. Now, this is an old trope, right? The other contract's still in force, so they're still under a contract. It's just that they don't have their new one. They're going to get back pay. So basically it is what Vallis is complaining about. Give them their back pay immediately. That's what he's complaining about. You never hear Paul Vallis ever talk about, hey, how about we hold those officers accountable? Hey, FOP, how about you get rid of these elements of the contract that stop the police accountability system and the state's attorney from prosecuting people, and how about and firing people, and how about you make all these other parts of your accountability more transparent? You know why he won't? He loves the FOP. Why does Vallis love the FOP? I wonder if there's a reason. He hates the Chicago Teachers Union. Thinks they ruin the schools, they ruin humanity, they're horrible, most horrible thing ever. Why does he like one public service union over another? I wonder if there's some underhanded, deceitful, disgusting, horrific reason for that. So typical Chicago hack politician that would make Vallis like the police union but hate the CTU. Oh, that's right. He was on the show. I think I remember. His son's a cop. His son's a cop. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. This guy, Paul Vallis, went and showed up, and he may be still involved to help the FOP negotiate the contract as a consultant for free. Why? Because his son's a cop, or maybe his two sons are cops, but at least one is. That's right. He doesn't have any teacher kids that are in the CTU, so the CTU can go to hell and be destroyed. But the police union that actually stands in the way of getting cops who beat and maim and murder people, mostly of color in this city, they're great. I'm going to help them. I'll stay quiet on all the accountability issues. They're great. Ooh, sorry. They're great. What a total hack Chicago politician thing to do. But that's what you get. Paul Vallis at his best. Anyways, okay. We're going to take a break. One quick minute about information about our Nation program that meets every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central. And then we'll talk about the new search warrant policy that you probably didn't catch in the media because Lightfoot dropped it on Friday. What's called taking out the garbage time. We'll be back in 1 minute. Join a group of engaged and committed individuals advocating for transparency and accountability in the local justice system around the country. Get engaged through crowdsourced research projects, digital activism, public policy advocacy, or become a social media ambassador. Our criminal justice system will not reform itself. Communities must demand it. Transparency can be the fuel for justice our local communities need to combat the weaponizing of data by our justice system. Transformation of our justice system cannot occur until we know exactly what they are doing and who they are doing it to. Get involved today. CJP Nation. All right, we are back. Our next segment. There's a thing in politics where if you have to release bad information, negative information, you do it on Friday because people don't really pay attention to the Friday night or the Saturday news. It's called taking out the garbage, right? Or dumping it in the garbage. Excuse me. Here's an article from the Tribune. CPD announces new policy on search warrants after uproar over Anjanette Young raid. Yep. On Friday, our Mayor Lori Lightfoot, head of the Police Accountability Task Force, president of the Chicago Police Board, at one point head, I don't know if it was chief administrator, I don't know what the term was, but head of the Office of Professional Standards. She was and a former assistant U.S. attorney, don't you know? Former $1 million a year partner at Mayer Brown Law Firm. She was so confident and proud of their new search warrant policy that they dumped it in the garbage on Friday. How sad is that? It's such a hack politician thing to do. I'm going to be different than Rob. I'm going to be different than Daley. I'm going to be different than the machine. And I mean by different, I mean do pretty much anything and everything they've done. It's such a hack move. There is an ordinance in place called the Anjanette Young Ordinance, if that has a name, right? Written by some aldermen, including 49th Ward Alderwoman Maria Haddon, who we are trying our best to find a time to schedule to get on the show. She's willing to come on. We're just trying to figure out and get our schedules working, but we're hoping to have her on the next couple of weeks to talk about the ordinance. Lightfoot said, no, that's not CPD policy. We have to do it in policy. No, you don't. It needs to be legislation, Mayor. That's a cop-out and horrific right at the start. We're going to do this policy. You're not going to need this ordinance. Okay. So then when she gets to release this policy, it is such a great policy. It is such monumental changes. And it is certainly going to change the way this happens for mostly communities of color around this city, that she dumps it in the Friday news, in the garbage on Friday. That's how proud of that she is. If that doesn't tell you this policy sucks, I don't know what will. I don't think we have access to it yet. I know there was an article about it. We will be doing an episode. We'll be doing a longer segment on the elements of that policy. I have no faith. Police policies don't work. Police regularly break them, and their buddies, the good cops, regularly cover that up. I think one thing not mentioned in the Anjanette Young case is that those cops, most of them got overtime. So they raided her house, or her apartment, at the end of the day. End of their shift, I should say. So it certainly makes it seem like they did it on purpose to rack up the overtime, which I know this has been a CPD thing. This is what cops do. They make arrests towards the end of their shifts, or they do these kind of search warrant tricks. So they do it at the end of the shift, so they got to rack up overtime, inventorying things and writing things up. And if they do an arrest, horrific hackery all around. I mostly think the Anjanette Young ordinance is pretty good. It's something that's desperately needed. I welcome a good policy change, but I don't care about the policy really, because I don't think it'll make any difference. I don't think they'll obey it. I just don't think there's nothing in the CPD's history that should give us pause to think, hey, yeah, you know what? They're really going to follow that policy now. They already had policies in place and they didn't follow them. That's how they wound up in that predicament, right? With the Anjanette Young raid going so poorly. So why is a new policy going to give them something? I don't understand. They're really going to abide by this one because I'm Mayor Lightfoot and it passed they wrote it up during my time. So they're really going to follow it. They haven't followed a damn policy for 100 years in Chicago. That's how we have Birds for 20, SOS, Joseph Manjanowski, the Austin 10, I think it was, Marquette 8, Austin 10, all these scandals. That's why we have them. The murder of Laquan McDonald, the murder, I'm going to include in there right now at this point, from what I've seen, the murder of Anthony Alvarez falls in there too. I'm less so on the Adam Toledo incident, but I think Anthony Alvarez is pretty much lock, stock, and barrel a bad shoot. But that's why these things happen, because they don't listen to policy. Okay. We're going to get to this. This is a good segue. Our next segment. Greater transparency would make Mayor Lightfoot's tough job a little easier. Candidates for public office are all for transparency. Politicians in office never are. And this Lightfoot is a great example. Can anyone demonstrate to me a massive, unprecedented change in transparency in Chicago since Lightfoot took office? Anyone? Put it in the comments. I'm willing to accept there might be, but I don't remember one. I mean, really monumental change. We were suing the police department. We're on the cusp of launching suits again. Another one on the police department, on COPA, on the police board, maybe ×2. The law department ×2, possibly. The mayor's office, ×1, maybe ×2. There's no difference. Yes. Would Lightfoot benefit from being more transparent? Of course. It's not in her interest. It's not in her interest. Her interest is to cover up and keep secret as much of what goes on as humanly possible. It's in those emails. We did a segment last Wednesday. What did we do? CPD has a drone policy. CPD bought a drone in July of 2020. As the city is in an uproar, cities around the country are in an uproar, protests, unrest about police misconduct, police murder, police overreach. What does the mayor do? Hey, police department, go buy a drone, start up a testing program, start up a drone program. Don't tell anyone. Yep. So of course she would, sometimes editorial board. Sure, she would benefit from being a greater increase in transparency. She's never going to do that. There's politicians. They're not going to do that unless they're forced. Once again, legislation. Don't count on politicians doing anything. Put it in the law. That's it. You can't let them make decisions on what they are or are not going to release because about whether how much it hurts them. That cannot be what's going on. But it is what we have in Chicago once again. I'm going to be different. Sure you are. Snoozer. They're never for real transparency. Our next story is somewhat of a story, somewhat not of a story. I don't know what this is. I'm afraid that this didn't make greater news around with other outlets, so I'm not sure how much to believe this one is actually true. So this is an article from the Sun-Times, which I believe was written by Frank Main and Fran Spielman. Ugh. Neither one's really good, but one is pretty darn bad and one is so-so at best. Fran, you know who I'm talking about. Title of the article, Police Reform Advocates Want to Stop Apparent Lightfoot Nominee for Top COPA Job. So Sydney Roberts got forced out, even though the mayor has lied to us and said she didn't force her out. That is a complete lie and probably should be recalled for that lie. She doesn't care because that's what politicians do is lie. So she forced out the head of COPA for a variety of reasons, some good, some bad. COPA will always fail unless you increase the resources. Politicians, good and bad alike, think you could just put a new person in there and it'll run better. It never will. If the investigations are taking 15 months, you need to put resources in there so they have enough investigators so they take 3 months. That's the bottom line. Anyways, Lori Leipzig, according to Main and Spielman, who is Chief Operating Officer of the Chicago Public Building Commission. Didn't really know that Chicago had a public building commission. But this woman who's a friend of Lightfoot's, and they worked together for a year in the Office of Professional Standards because that was running so well then. I've heard people in the office liked Lightfoot, but I don't know a damn thing. That I don't see any data that I know of that office ran better under Lightfoot. And while Lightfoot and Leipzig, it turns out, were there. So supposedly, if you read the article, it's not about a permanent replacement, it seems. It seems like Lightfoot's looking for a year replacement. She's going to go whip them into shape. She's not. Without more resources, that office is not getting better. But anyways, Lori Leipzig supposedly is being named for this job as a 1 year to finish the term of Sydney Roberts for 1 year. And then I guess they're going to, within that time, they're going to do a national search. I don't really know if that's true. That's what my idea is with this, and that's why Leipzig's not going in for just a whole new term. I don't know why she'd go in for a year, but can you trust this report? I don't really know. Possibly. There's not sourcing in there that makes me really believe that they have the goods. So who knows? Supposedly advocates for reform of COPA are pushing against Leipzig taking the job. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have sources on the national level of police accountability, right? And so there's an organization called National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement, NACOL. And there's a bunch of people that have worked in cities across the country on this topic. This COPA job, the head of COPA, an agency like COPA, should be a really attractive job. It pays pretty well. It's in a big city. It's got a department that needs a lot of help. But from what I understand, no one wants to come work in Chicago. No one. Given how Roberts was pushed out, who is going to want to move themselves and their families to Chicago to take that job? It may very well be that Lori Leipzig is it. That's as good as it's going to get. If you look at the Deputy Public Safety Inspector General's office, I'm the one that started it. It was my idea that gave the Community Renewal Society that created the Deputy Public Safety Inspector General's office. In that first hire, Laura Kennard, horrific, cop-loving, the worst person for that job humanly possible. Laura's really smart, but she just loves cops. You cannot love and idolize police and hold them accountable. You can't. But according to sources within the IG's office, they had no one, and within the city council, no one applied. So the second round came, and I actually applied. I'm like, hell, if they can give Laura Kennard the job, they can probably give me the job. And in that second run, they actually took a friend of mine, Joey Lapari, who had national level experience in New York and in Syracuse. He ran a one-person's office in Syracuse, then moved to the Inspector General's office for the New York, that oversaw the New York Police Department. So big city experience, as big as it gets, basically. And he lasted like a year and a half before, who knows why. If I had to bet, I would think he got pushed out too, but he was gone. So Joe Ferguson had to appoint Deborah Witzberg. Seems pretty good for the job, but she was internal. These are national level jobs at what should be really attractive positions, and they can't find people to apply for them. The reality is, Lori Leipson may be as good as it's going to get. I don't know anything about her, but I don't think if they do a national search, they're going to get all kinds of great resumes in. That's my feeling on the topic, and that should really worry people. Pushing out Sydney Roberts may have been a massive mistake. I was not a fan of Roberts getting the job. I think Lightfoot was. I think they know each other. Roberts was head of the Secretary of State's police, which was a joke. Like, that's not a position where someone comes from there, which is thought of by many justice people as a patronage army for Jesse White for that political office. You don't bring someone in from that patronage army. I don't know. Sydney Roberts may be the greatest person ever, but that was the thinking to run a police accountability agency on the Chicago Police Department. Isn't going to work. No one's going to respect it. Now, the office had massive, massive issues. There's no denying that. Rahm Emanuel, and I was in on some of those negotiations, never gave them, and the city council and the corp council, horrific people, they did not give COPA the adequate resources. This is OPS had investigations took forever. Then we created the Independent Police Review Authority, OPS, Office of Professional Standards, an office within CDPD. Then we created the Independent Police Review Authority, or IPRA. They didn't have cases took forever in there, came forever in OPS, then forever in IPRA. So now we created COPA, and it's once again taking forever. How about we just triple the resources for 3 years or 5 years, and let's see if they, with hiring a massive number of investigators, they can bring those numbers down. Starving it for resources and expecting massively great results is idiotic and stupid. But that's how our politicians govern in Chicago. It's about corruption, idiotic stupidity, right? And more corruption. That's why we have so many aldermen indicted. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're basically out of time. On Wednesday, we'll get to the story about CPD car chases in 2019 and that report. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. We will see you Wednesday at 5:30. Just so you know, we are off Friday and Monday. The 21st and the 24th, I believe those dates are, because I'm getting my first vacation since January of 2020. And then we'll be back on Wednesday and then down for the Memorial Day weekend. So anyways, we will see you Wednesday at 5:30. Thank you and have a great night.